Yep.
So what's do you have a connection with Northern Europe, continental Europe? And is it design houses in Paris? We didn't hear any of that. So is that a fading industry?
No. I go to Europe twice a year. I go to a show called Premier Vision, which is the largest textile show in the world. I go, our trip starts off, we fly into Milan, we shop Milan. Then we go to Bergamo, work with our design team. We go to Florence, where we have an office. We work with our team there to develop our sweaters and so forth. Get on a train that night, go to Paris, shop Paris, go to the show next day. That night, get on from there, go to a flight to London. We work London and that, get on a plane and come home. So people think, oh, that looks like a lot of fun. We shop 30 to 40 stores a day. And I've been doing it for 20-some years. So you get good at it, and you know how to do it.
Yeah.
And it's still a very important part of our business.
So coming from, just want to follow up, there's the British American Business Council has been around for a few years, but we're trying to get more business to business. So what's the connection that you say you're in London? So what's the, what could we be doing more with the UK in the fashion industry?
Well, there's a, London has its designers. You can speak to this too, but designers shop other designers. And it's not in this term called knockoff. It doesn't really, it exists in some levels, but in other levels, it's like getting ideas. So somebody might be something very simple as, boy, this fabric's a little different, but look at how they did this trim. That might be the only element. So it's really more elements that you're looking at, and you're looking at, I don't know, you become unconsciously competent at being able to see something and noticing something a little different in a trend. And that's what you're looking for, is the aggregate and where is it moving. You're not so much going out there and buying garments to make copies of them.
Yeah, okay.
Can I go back to China for a quick minute? So you were talking earlier about tax incentives, so on and so forth. And as you look, 66% of all of the things are happening in China. So that's a huge barrier to entry for a small business person such as myself. So when I tried to launch my wonderful line, I looked here in the States initially, and it's ridiculously hard for somebody like me. We get crowded out by military, we get crowded out by the bigger stores, so on and so forth. So I'm very lucky. I'm manufacturing up in Vancouver, BC. So I'm interested in some of the things that you can talk about with regard to NAFTA and some of the tax benefits and incentives and so on and so forth. I mean, this kind of, 0.5 is, Canada, others, so on and so forth. I'm wondering what might be done in terms of relationships for, really, really early upstream companies like mine, and how to give us a little bit of a foot up so that we can survive and thrive and bring our really innovative, I've heard of a couple of trends here, and I'm like, wow, my product has all of these things. Innovative fabrics, something that has technology that protects from electromagnetic frequencies from cell phones. All of these different things in a fashion-forward way. I'm from New York, so I try to bring and synthesize all my stuff together. And it's really hard, and unfortunately, I don't come from the background of design or anything. This kind of evolved in a very organic way. And so for me, I'm really excited to speak to some people in terms of how to get a footing and a toehold, but also to really understand the business side, the NAFTA, and what I could be doing to really benefit my company and my product.
So thoughts about NAFTA?
I can speak about when I first came in. We used to have a men's clothing business, and up by that, making suits and that, some of the best in the United States. But when NAFTA came in, what happened is we didn't change the tariffs on importing wool. So it was cheaper for us to move all our production to Canada. And so that was a negative side of it. We lost a whole industry in the United States because of NAFTA. But on the flip side of that, we have another. NAFTA is just one initiative. We also have the Peruvian, okay? And that's why I make all my knits in Peru, because I can do Peruvian cotton. I can fly them to Seattle, land them, and the price is lower than if I made them in China and paid the 25% duty. So, and actually it's Pima cotton, and they would be buying Peruvian Pima cotton yarns in China, knitting them there and sending them there. So it's been a big boom for Peru. Then you have AGOA, which is the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which is for southern sub-Sahara countries. So I make shirts in Mauritius, and the reason why is Mauritius is a small island in the Indian Ocean, and we can ship them to Seattle. It's duty free. And you were talking about minimums. Minimums are always going to be an issue, no matter. It's in minimums. What she's saying is, if I want to make this shirt I have to make 1,200 shirts. Okay, that's a sewing minimum. But I also have to make 1,000 meters of fabric. There's two, so that's 500 shirts. But, okay, so I can make 500 shirts. No, you have to make 1,200 shirts. So you have all of these, like little puzzle you have to put together. Now, we also have a collection we make in Italy. Made in Italy, we show it at the Pidione. That I can make 25 shirts. But those shirts sell for $180 in the US versus this shirt selling for $99. Okay? And that's the challenge, is you're trying to be competitive, you're trying to make great product, but yet you can't be competitive in the market to get off ground zero. And so everyone says, I love your product, it's too expensive. Go. So you're in a catch-22.
Let me ask a question following that, because I think a lot of your points were really interesting and I think important, because we've had an opportunity to look at a lot of different industry clusters, and I have to tell you, the fashion industry, Troy and I were talking about this earlier, strikes me it is more secretive than the defense industry. We've had an opportunity to work with the defense industry, so in some ways it seems like there's a little bit of a disconnect between a lot of the companies, and I mean, we had folks asking us to sign non-disclosure agreements for some really simple survey information. And in some ways you think, gosh, that's going to be hard for everybody to start leveraging each other if no one's willing to kind of at least come together. Is that the nature of the industry? Do they come together in New York or in any of the other major? Or is it a part of the beast? And how do we overcome that if we're going to come together and grow the industry collectively?
I think it's a little bit of the nature of the beast. There aren't necessarily any legal laws that protect designers, so a lot of times, yeah, there is that sort of fear of being knocked off or someone stealing your designs, and what are your repercussions, especially as a new designer and just starting up. That's all you have, and there really isn't legally any way to pursue someone that may take your sketches. But I think there is a way for the people to come together, and I think they are willing to share a little bit of resources, so long as it's in a non-threatening way. So one of the things that we are launching later this year is a guild, essentially very similar to the Tech Association, where we bring people together. They can share resources as far as where they're doing their manufacturing, maybe collaborating on purchasing the same fabric, as long as they're not in the same industry. So a children's line and a women's line, a men's line and a women's line. So sort of dealing with some of those issues that they have as far as minimums, as far as manufacturing, figuring out where to purchase. If you're all doing a buying trip to New York, hey, let's buy our tickets together. Little things like that, where it's not necessarily encroaching on your actual design, but helping with the business side of it.
I was going to add to that, you're only as good as your last collection.
Right.
Okay? You're only as good as your last collection. We do 6 collections a year. So we're in constant process. So you have a tendency not to give away your story.
Can I also say there are trade associations that sometimes help go through the MARAD, like there's the American Association of Textile Chemists and Colorists, because color matching is such an issue and different screens have different resolutions. So they kind of come together and address that from a technical point of view. There's also the American Society for Testing and Materials, which also does a lot with the regulations that regulate products that can go in store. There's the International, or the Industrial Fabrics Association, which does more of the high-tech kinds of things. So I think the trade organizations, too, that are within the industry do address some of the quagmire. And if you go to their meetings, they have things like what's going on with NAFTA and, the African, and they have people that are up to date on that. So it is very secretive. And as Jeff said, some of the information we could not get, but there are trade organizations out there for maneuvering through some of it. And most of them have regional section meetings that you can become involved in.
And VIX is a big part of it too, which is how we barcode things, how we EEI things back and forth. Our whole business nowadays is we don't get paper. We get electronic transmissions that go into our computer, and that's our purchase order. We download, pick from that, we invoice that. It's all, with major people, it's all EDI.
Councilmember Kutchmar.
Thank you. Jeff knows that I'm a council member from the city of Federal Way. I was mayor last year. We're very interested in attracting business to our community, and we've started medical device incubator. And so the only thing I think that's fashion related, we're a city of 90,000 and the surrounding area is 120,000 total. We're halfway between SeaTac, we're halfway between Seattle and Tacoma and 20 minutes from SeaTac. We're currently spending $100 million on infrastructure in order, as Dean said, to improve our road infrastructure, to improve east-west connectivity for trucking, the trucking industry. And so what I would be interested if you could address business incubators. With the only thing fashion related we have in our city is Christine Alexander's, which is I love her. She has a warehouse in the retail portion of the warehouse, and of course supplies Nordstrom's. But how can we attract more, perhaps a business incubator to attract more fashion industry to our city?
Pay for it.
Incubators are an interesting concept for businesses. I think in various different industries they work. Fashion is not necessarily one of them because of the various different secretive, I don't want to share my ideas, I don't want to be in the same space as someone else. And essentially a fashion incubator would be setting up shop with a bunch of various different designers all in one location, sharing goods, sharing manufacturer sharing, and that just goes against everything that most designers are looking for. So we do believe there are a way to bring those people together, but an incubator isn't necessarily the end result. So that's why we're leaning more towards an association kind of thing to bring them in.
So for a community like Federal Way or like Renton, where we have the Cutter and Buck distribution facility,
Right.
but the headquarters in Seattle, or Dean, you mentioned your distribution facilities in Kent, but your offices are in Bellevue. Is there any hope? But REI has gone the other way and put everybody in the same room in a suburban industrial area, right? So what is the hope for communities like ours to try to bring the high-end jobs together with the low-end jobs? Or,
Fix 405, 167.
well, we're working on that.
I have to plan my trip to the warehouse, because it can go, or else I put one of our people and we go in pairs. Because if we don't get into the express lane, it's an hour and a half, which should be a 15-minute drive. And it's a 2-hour trip home. And so half my day shot on 167. So we avoid 167, we do west. You got all the tricks of the trade.
Sure.
And my preference would be to have the warehouse, we have a photo studio, which I could have a warehouse with a photo studio in it. I could have my distribution there. I could have a discount storefront, for samples and all that stuff that we clear out over a period of time. But there's all these things we could do, but just getting everybody around and all the logistics, I'd rather take 5 minutes from my house and go down right on I-90. That's the bottom line.
We have time for just 2 or 3 more questions.
I actually, I live in Renton, and a lot of things, I love it. And I always have to, the connotation of cities like Renton, SeaTac, Federal Way, is historically have been negative, which aren't necessarily true nowadays. So sort of filling that gap or changing the perception of what it is, in addition to the traffic, would help. As far as independence, trying to find out a way to create creative spaces. Downtown Seattle has done it for years, is they've given tax breaks, they've given rent breaks to people that really just need a space. So maybe having a building that's dedicated to creative spaces, not only will it attract designers, but also artists, musicians. I mean,
But that's not an incubator?
it's not an incubator.
Because you just talked
no,
about it.
That's just a building.
So cheap space is what you're
Just
saying.
But I will say, I did look at Renton first. I did look at Renton first.
We've looked at Renton as far as our offices as well.
It just
You
hasn't
didn't come
gotten
talk
there
to
yet.
me.
From the federal perspective, I really appreciate this, and Congressman McDermott really, as the ranking member on the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Trade, looks at these issues very carefully. I mean, very often that connection between private industry and some legislation or trade agreement is tenuous at best. So I really value coming together and understanding what the needs are from the perspective of the people who use the services and who are responsible for bringing the country out of the economic recession. Now that said, there's a lot of resources that are available that our offices, if you have problems with customs, if you have problems with immigration issues, if you have problems with concerns with trade agreements, questions about what trade agreements apply and what, these are things that we can pull together, federal resources. We can either do casework to help out individual specific instance where there's a problem, or we can bring together whole federal agencies where they can do seminars on anything from healthcare reform and how it's going to impact your business to the export assistance financing and or to impacts of trade, or the work with the ports to make sure that the competitiveness and the supply chain is working as good as it can. So this is, we're really both, thank you very much. I love hearing this information. I'm really looking forward to the rest of the tour. But also, if there's ways we can help, please let us know as a government official or someone who represents a government official. It just doesn't happen without that dialogue. And we really encourage that sort of discussion. So I look forward to following up with many of you. And please,
You were going to make a point.
No, I think, well, she's gone now. It was really about a big thing that is missing is the supplier. So can you encourage businesses that supply the things that these independent designers need? So whether it's manufacturers, whether it's notion suppliers, fabric suppliers, I think that would be a big help. And if you can start there, and maybe the garment industry doesn't have to be in downtown Seattle. Maybe it's in Renton. I don't know.
Let me ask a follow-up question to that to some of our panelists here. So, traditionally when we see large firms, like in aerospace, you've got Boeing, and so there are 650 aerospace companies in the state of Washington because Boeing is here, because they want to be close to Boeing. In this region, we have Nordstrom and Eddie Bauer and all of these, REI, all of these large, tentpole firms in the industry. Why aren't we seeing that same clustering? Why is it because those large companies don't do business with small local companies?
It's very simple. 30, 40 years ago, it was difficult to get from one city to another city. Okay, so then you had epicenters. So people were in New York, they did the business in New York. In San Francisco, they did the business in San Francisco. 4 hours, I could be walking the street of New York shopping. Okay, airfare, $500 round trip. And a business is going to operate in an area where it's going to make money. And I will tell you, New York is not the New York it was 30 years ago. So don't kid yourself. That thing is shrunk. A lot of the manufacturing's disappeared. The people that worked as designers there are now working as independent designers. Probably the biggest area that is, I think, under talked about is not so much the creative design from a the look, the pattern. It's really more the technical design, which is the fit, the consistent of it, how the spec packs are put together. Because I made a comment earlier, we're creating intellectual properties. And this pattern right here, that's just the beginning of it. There's a lot more that goes behind it. And I think that's something this area could supply. But going back to it, it's so easy to get on a plane. What's it cost to go to LA?
And frankly, the designers love to go.
Yeah.
It's actually
It's
a
a
benefit
Betty.
to them that they get to go to New York and spend some time there. They get to go to Los Angeles.
Exactly. Have a lobster roll.
That's true for the big companies. So the
Right.
independent designers who are starting out who have no money,
Yeah.
they cannot spend $200.
I know.
But the question was, why aren't the large companies attracting that? Well, they don't need to. I think Dean's making a great
Right.
point, because you can just go find it.
So in terms of showcasing the cluster here, is anybody talking about trying to bring Project Runway to Seattle?
They're actually doing a casting right now.
Yeah, they're doing it right now.
What are we doing here?
Exactly.
So we are out of time. I think there's one more really quick last question.
Yes,
Go ahead. You've been quiet all day.
I guess my main question is, I know that Seattle's just kind of trying to get on the fashion map versus LA, New York. And this question is actually specifically for Fashion Week Seattle. I saw on your website you guys had produced past events. What are you guys doing to put Seattle on the fashion map? Or just talk about maybe like a few of your events that you guys produced in the past and is it recurring? And is it something similar to what like Gabriel Choi is doing for Seattle Fashion Week every year?
So the events that we've done in the past have been networking events. We've done an event for local people in the industry so they can actually meet each other. That's one of the big stratifications of it. We've done designer dinners. We've done buyer dinners. We also produce 2 large events every year. So we're gearing up for our spring-summer event right now. It's very different than, it's not very different, but it is slightly different than Fashion week. Our take on Fashion Week is that it's a little bit more entertainment based as opposed to fashion based. And while they do feature designers, but there's also a lot of other things that go into it, we're strictly about the fashion. So we do want to, make it fun, but we try to focus on local designers. They bring in designers from other places. So we always try to feature nothing but local designers, bring true runway style to Seattle. So
Thank you.
I think that's
So please join me in thanking our panelists.